Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Veritas Catholic Network. Actually, excuse me, Joe and I did a Veritas Catholic radio show yesterday, so I got a little bit confused. We're on the Crusade channel, so all you Crusaders out there, King Dude, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to screw up, but we're on the Crusade.
I love it.
I tell you, Joe, I sometimes get big-headed. I'm like, hey, I'm pretty good at this intro and outro stuff, but then once in a while, I have a brain freeze, or another word I could use. So you're listening to the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, please follow Joe and I on social media, wherever you can find us. Like, subscribe, share, as I always say, do all that fun stuff. Help us out any way you can. Please keep us in your prayers. And yes, we are on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. That's in the Connecticut area, Northern Long Island, Westchester County, 1350 on your AM dial. So we have a Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern time interview show, and we broadcast an interview this past Sunday with Dan Leroy, talking about American patriots, Catholic patriots of the American Revolution. It was a great conversation. We have a lot of great conversations, so you could look us up on there. So we encourage you to do that, and we're spreading the word. That's what we got to do, Joe. We have to spread the word, or the logos, as they say in Greek. Okay, because logos is obviously much more weighty term. So anyway, we have a great conversation for you tonight. And one of the things that Joe and I always say is, we're called to do certain things. We're called, obviously, to do God's will, as Jesus tells us. We're also called by the church to engage in the culture, engage in the politics. We have to vote. There's a lot of things that we have to do that seem on more of a temporal level. But as Catholics, we know that we have to invoke supernatural help, okay? We always have to ask our Lord for his graces and his blessings so that we can fight the spiritual battle. We have to remember that, and I think it was very important. Joe and I talked about it this past week. We have to look to Our Lady, and what better example than Our Lady of Sorrows? And that's something that Joe and I want to talk about, because sometimes I think, some of our audience on social media, anyway, they love when Joe and I are political. They don't like when we're as Catholic. Some of our more Catholic fans, if you want to call it that, Joe, or people who listen to us, all right? Sometimes they think we're being a little bit too political. Joe and I are just trying to do the right thing. Tonight's show, we are going to talk about the politics and the culture, but we're going to start out by talking about the need to look to Our Lady of Sorrows, what she went through. Why is that an example for us in these troubled times that we live in? We think it's a perfect example for us. Joe and I say on the show all the time, we're praying to Jesus that he sends his Blessed Mother to straighten out this godforsaken country that we live in. All right, so we think that's going to be a really good conversation. Another good conversation that ties into both politics and religion, particularly the Catholic religion, is work. Work. Good old-fashioned work, okay? We're losing that. We're losing what it means, what work actually means. The left calls it drudgery. The right, many times, treats workers like slaves or serfs, okay? So the bottom line is we need to talk about work, and funny enough, it's a Republican senator. Joe, I say funny enough, okay? Marco Rubio wrote a really good article in Joe was in First Things about work. And guess who he alludes to? Pope St. John Paul II and Laborem Exercens, which was his encyclical on work. That conversation is right up our alley, okay? Because we're constantly hammering home about work. So we're going to have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation about that tonight. Molly Hemingway reminds us in The Federalist that we need courage. Now, I don't know why we have to say it, but guess what, Joe? There's a lot of feckless, cowardly people out there who call themselves conservative, and we're not the bravest couple guys in the world. But not for nothing, there's people out there that won't even do what we do. They won't even open their mouth a little bit. And Molly Hemingway's got something to say about that. So we want to talk about that. Remember, Joe, when Kavanaugh was first put up, and or Gore, I think it was Gorsuch. Either way, Chuck Schumer was like, "Why don't you just put up Merrick Garland and we'll vote on Merrick? He's a moderate. He's a moderate. He's not a moderate. He's a leftist extremist." Okay, and now he's attacking pro-life Americans. Well, Bill Donahue provides a really good article on that, and it's something that our audience here at the Crusade Channel is going to want to hear. This smearing of pro-life people as being violent people, that's not going to stand, Joe. That will not stand. We're not going to allow that by Mr. Moderate Merrick Garland. George Bush, Joe, is a disgraziad. I know he's not Italian. Okay, but George W. Bush is a disgraziad. What he did on the anniversary of 9/11, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and the way he disparaged people like us and all the good people at the Crusade Channel, okay, unforgivable as far as I'm concerned. And we're going to break that down, how we've been stabbed in the back repeatedly by conservatives, so-called conservatives. Well, we just got stabbed in the back by W. The W. He stabbed us in the back. And, I think women are finding themselves, Joe, slightly liberated, because of COVID. A lot of women left the workforce. A lot of women are homeschooling. A lot of women are saying that, not for anything, I feel more liberated now that I'm out of the workforce. I think that's a tenable position. I think it's a legitimate position to take. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too. So with all that said, Joe Resinello, I'm handing it over to you, my brother.
I'm glad that you pronounced John Paul's, encyclical, because I pronounce those encyclicals like Archie Bunker. Horrible.
Listen, I've had to go. Sometimes it's so bad with the Latin names with me. I actually go on YouTube, let's say YouBoob, and I'll Google that so I could see somebody talking about that encyclical, so I can know how to pronounce it. Now, I didn't do that.
You did a good job. You did a good job. I mean, I read the article. I didn't read the encyclical in its entirety, but I was just like, oh gosh, I'm glad Joe pronounced that properly, because I'm going to pull an Archie Bunker on you.
Listen, I think I got it right. The worst, though, is like on our Veritas show when we're doing interviews and I don't have a clue how to pronounce our guest name. I know the guest, but sometimes I don't know how to pronounce their name. So yeah, I got you always got to cover your bases, Resinello. You know that.
Nice, I love it. As Joe said, we're going to talk about Our Lady of Sorrows. Basically, there was a great article in Crisis Magazine by Thomas Griffin, basically saying Our Lady of Sorrows and the heartbeat of faith. This is something I think that Joe and I have been pounding on for quite some time, because we do rosary rallies. It's almost a solid year now. We do it the first Saturday of every month. America needs Fatima. This is something that TFP, Tradition, Family, and Property, also beats that drum pretty heavy. We've interviewed both John Ritchie and Horvat. Great guest, fantastic guest, and a great book, Return to Order. Highly recommend it. I think, frankly, there is no man or woman alive that can solve our issues in America. Like, honestly, it's gone to a point. I'm not saying things can't get better, but what I am saying is the horse is out of the barn. I mean, in so many ways, outside of a divine act. And they're secular people could hear me saying that, they'll laugh. But I mean that sincerely. I do not think any man or woman alive, Republican or Democrat, can help America at this point. That's why we pray the first Saturday of every month. We definitely, actually, I saw today, Joe, on social media, Father Imperato, Doug Barry, they're doing, I think it's October 10th, a rosary rally in Washington, D.C.
Oh, great.
So I think other people are on this onto this idea, because frankly, like I said, it's a matter of heart. America is just far from God, and people don't want to hear it. They just don't want to hear it. They're not interested, and that's why. Please.
Well, you either have the woe is me crowd. Somebody commented in the chat room, said, why are conservatives always crying? Why are we so sensitive when we get called out. Called out by whom? We're not sensitive at all. We're calling BS is what we're calling. In other words, I'm calling, and we'll get into it. I'm not going to get into it now. All right, but the fact is, you either have the woe is me crowd. What are we going to do about all that? I mean, Joe, I see videos online about good parents going up to these school boards and reading them the riot act. You got a mayor that's calling for the entire school board to resign. We know, as I said in the beginning, Joe, there are things that not only we can do, we're obligated to do. But I think you're right, is that the horse is out of the barn. And the only thing that's going to kick that horse's butt back into the barn, in my view, is Our Lady. And that's going to require prayer. A lot of people might say, well, why doesn't God end this? Why doesn't he, let's say he intends to send Our Lady to America, Our Lady of the Americas. How would that be? All right. How about Our Lady of Hoboken? All right.
Nice.
Our Lady appears to the pagans over in Hoboken. Okay. But my point is that, but God, I do believe, is punishing us. I heard Father Rutler say one time in a video, Father George Rutler, great priest. Father Rutler said, God loves us too much not to punish us because he's a good father. Okay. We're going through the punishment. Now, I don't doubt in my mind that the Lord is going to do something, that divine intervention will take place. Okay. But we got to pray for it. And I think that this was a very good way to go about talking about this because, listen, Joe, at the end of the day, what we go through in America, okay, America, we are going to be talking about George Bush, so it's America, all right?
Nice.
What we go through in America, it's nothing compared to what Our Lady went through. And we're going to talk about that.
Well, it's funny. I mean, even before we get into that, I could just speak personally, talking about how people, this is the state that we're in. We talked about it a little earlier on other shows. A friend of mine who's a deacon is trying to fly a Right to Life flag, and he made a presentation in front of the council in Rutherford, New Jersey. I did as well. They're not voting on it. They tabled it. Now, another house of worship in the same town also flew a social issues flag. They flew a rainbow flag. And so that was the position. And they have, I mean, to fly the flag comports with the law, and they're not voting on it. So we went again in front of the council this past week and spoke. And still, like, people talk, they talk. Joe, they don't care.
Right.
Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, it's just nothing. It's just talk. They are empowered, and they don't care. What they understand is legal ramifications. They understand monetary ramifications, but the right thing to do has nothing to do with it anymore. There is no shame. And that's what I'm saying, where like God has to intervene in, and he will, because I'll be honest with you, it happened in the Old Testament, as you said, with Israel and Egypt. The right always prevails in the end, always. But at this point in time, these people are empowered. They have control of everything from the government to corporations. And frankly, people don't give up power. You take power. That's how power works. And frankly, the only way that America will get back on its 2 feet, if you ask me, is most likely through pain. And what do I mean by that? Some type of tragedy, an unforeseen tragedy, like where people kind of come together again. They feel it. And then maybe God will touch people's hearts.
We're talking about sorrow tonight. We're talking about Our Lady of Sorrows. Okay. Again, I'll reiterate. Okay. We go through nothing compared to what she went through. Yeah. She bore that cross. Her heart was pierced. Okay. As Simeon prophesied. And she did it well. She witnessed the gravest injustice that human beings have ever committed. Now, leaving aside the fact that was her son. Okay. Jesus is her son. But the thing is, but she witnessed, because Jesus is the most blameless person. Okay, fully human, fully divine, but most perfect person, sinless. Okay, it's the gravest injustice that human beings killed their own creator, and she had to endure that. So you think
Well,
about. Go
you're
ahead. Go
right.
ahead. You
Let's
want to
get
get
into
into
it. Again, this article comes from Thomas Griffin. We'll just start it off. Obviously, September 15th is pretty recent, and that is the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows, where the church remembers both the incarnation and the crucifixion involved with Our Lady. Simeon, as Joe said, foretold us a sword would pierce her heart. That's in Luke chapter 2. And Christ breathed his last with his mother and John at his feet. Her lesson for practical Catholics is to place our attention on her son while we travel through this valley of tears, the roller coaster ride of tribulations. How true it is to look straight ahead and to focus on God. Ultimately, God has a plan, and ultimately, God wills everything for a greater good. God does not want people to suffer because we have free will. But God uses our free will and suffering to basically achieve a greater good. And we have seen that throughout history. When you look back at certain events, there are good things that come from it. That doesn't like minimize the hardship and the sorrow that people go through.
Joe, let me cut you off right there. But remember something. This is one of my biggest arguments. In other words, and I've had this conversation, if you want to call it that, with some. Well, no, it has been. I've dealt with civil atheists in the past, and I use the example of, and it ties into what you're saying. I use the example of the church itself. I say I would tell a couple of atheist friends of mine. I remember having a conversation with and saying, "Well, you don't even believe in the church." I would go so far as to say that's one of the reasons why I do believe in the church. The church shouldn't even be here. It shouldn't even be here. In other words, if might makes right, the church should have been squashed by Nero. In other words, everybody should have went running for the hills. Nobody would even dare call themselves a Christian. Okay, at that point, and the whole thing should have just folded and ended. But that pain and suffering, remember what Tertullian said, okay? The seed of the church is the blood of the martyrs. That pain and suffering without God is needless. You would say, well, those people needlessly suffered. But we have a church because of their suffering, okay? Because of their martyrdom, red martyrdom, the persecution, the sorrow they had to go through, okay? And so that's, I'm only using that as an example as one of the fruits that we could point to in history. The church is the oldest institution, the longest lasting institution in human history. It started with a bunch of followers of Jesus getting killed. Okay. So the pain and the suffering who was in more of a dire circumstance? Catholics and other people of goodwill in America, or the early Christians? Those people, that they literally faced that. Now we may have a point where in the future where we're going to have to face death. And in recent history, we could look at Mexico during the Cristero War. Okay, they pulled people out. They pulled priests out of the church and just shot them. Okay, so this is not far gone ancient history where Catholics have been persecuted. Okay,
That's 100 years.
There's 100 years, and even more recent examples you could look at in China now. All right,
how about Nigeria?
All right.
No one cares about Nigeria, but Nigeria has more martyrs every year than I don't know what.
Right. But they bear their suffering well. Those Chinese, the underground Chinese, the Nigerians, the Catholic Nigerians, right? And up and down history, Catholics have borne their suffering well, okay? Knowing that the trust in God, okay, is what they have to remain focused on. And Our Lady of Sorrows is that prime example. I mean, because go ahead,
this is
Joe,
where
please.
I'll tell you what, though, when you talk about suffering, I always refer to Poland. Poland went through quite a suffering in the 20th century, and they're phenomenal Catholics as a result of it. And this is what I mean why people don't listen. They don't care. You could talk to people till they're blue in the face. They don't listen. It's like talking to the wall. They don't care. And frankly, you see the fruit of all of this destruction right in front of us, and they still don't care. Joe, right. Listen, look at the last 7-8 months of the Biden regime. Look at what's going on in America. You have inflation. My food bill is up $30 to $50 a week, right, as a result of it. Look at the price of gasoline. All of those things are regressive taxes on the poor that they claim to be helping the poor. No, that affects the poor more than anybody. Gasoline affects the price of everything. Okay, let's look at Afghanistan, an absolute and utter embarrassment. Let's
Disaster.
look at the border. The border, even if you are all for open borders, look at the one factor that put Biden in the chair, quote unquote, COVID. It was COVID. Those
Right.
people are not being tested.
Right.
Like even if you're a COVID nut and this is like your hang up to the nth degree, why aren't you shouting from the rooftops? They shouted about Trump.
Right. Joe, let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession from sunup to sundown. Crusade Channel, as I said, is the last live radio station standing. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Front Line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello way in the breach already on the Crusade Channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. The chat room at crusadechannel.com/chat is the only social media out there worth actually socializing in. Please be sure, okay, to spread the word that people need to get a premium membership at the Crusade Channel. It's fantastic lineup, a tremendous station, spreading the truth, getting it out there, doing what we're all supposed to be doing. So go to crusadechannel.com, hit listen free, subscribe, do the trial subscription, spread the word to your friends. And wherever you see Joe and I on social media, remember, we're always promoting Crusade Channel. It's a great station. So, Joe, go ahead. We took a break, but I want you to continue your thought.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is like all these things, like say you're like COVID is your thing. That's your issue. And there's many Democrats, frankly, that's their issue. It's their issue. There's tens of thousands of people coming over the border. They're not being tested. Right. No one cares about that. Like, this is a disaster. If you're an objective person, forget about like political hats. Mm-hmm. An objective person looking at the last 9 months. Sorry, guys, it's not successful. I am very sorry. It's a bad move. And you know something? The worst is yet to come, in my view. This guy, it's the worst is yet to come.
Listen, if people think that things are bad, okay, they have a year and a half or so to wreak some serious havoc. Maybe a year, let's say, to wreak some serious havoc on us. I'm not going to say on America. America is teetering with oblivion. We're talking now about us as individuals and families, okay? Because America's not going to be the same on the other end of this. We don't know. Now, again, we're here talking about Our Lady of Sorrows, Joe Resinello. Tremendous trust and confidence, okay, in God. We have a sincere hope that on the other end of this, things are going to be a lot better. Hopefully, America's a more moral nation that looks to Christ and his church, okay? We talked about this recently with our friend Tim Gordon. I mean, the seeds of the Catholic faith are in America, whether the Protestants want to admit it or not. We just need to bring them to the surface and apply those things, all right, and get back on a sound moral footing as a nation. But, Joe, I'm with you. Things are going to get bad. However, we do have trust. Now, I will want to say this. I want to make another point, Joe, and I want your comments that Griffin makes in this article in Crisis. He says, now, this is what ties into this. Hearts will be hurting among Catholic faithful because we desperately know that our world needs the light of Christ and the love of Mother Mary if we're to carry the burdens of this world with courage and fidelity. That's a key part I'd love for you to comment on. Joe, we belong to a movement, a feckless movement, if you want to call us conservatives. We belong to a cowardly political party, if you want to refer to us as Republicans, okay? In other words, where's the courage, Joe? Especially looking to Our Lady for her courage. Where's the courage in this country? Because got a couple guys like us who could lose a lot. Let's face it, with all the political correctness and everything out there, okay, we could lose a lot by doing what we do. But why are we able to do it? And other people, it's like pulling teeth to get them to step up.
Well, I think at the end of the day, and I'm not comparing us or anybody, frankly, that I know to martyrs. It's a totally different level.
Mhm.
But how do martyrs do it? They believe in God. They have a faith. Their life isn't grounded in the here and now. And this is, I think, and we could talk about this a little bit deeper with the Hemingway piece later on in the show.
Mhm.
But I don't think the conservatives have, a lot of people have that faith. You see, when you have faith, you know God is going to take care of you. You put your trust in God. And frankly, you're not living for the here and now. You're living for heaven. You're a pilgrim. You're walking through the valley of tears. I don't think America, and this is why I don't think a politician can fix this. America doesn't have that faith. Even amongst the Catholic faithful, what is it? Maybe 19% now are baptized Catholics. Of that, only half go to church. Of the people who go to church, 30% believe in the true presence of the Eucharist. I mean, like, there isn't that faith, and that's why, Joe, people don't stand up, because it's like you're not going to risk everything for something that you like. You have to believe deeply in something, and we don't have that anymore. You see, America, sadly, as a whole, there are God-fearing people in America from Hawaii to Maine. However, as a whole, it's a godless country. What do you say? Why do you say that, Joe Rossinell? Well, look at our legislation. Look what we condone. It's a godless country. We kill babies in the womb up to birth.
Right.
How could one say that we believe in God? Sorry, guys, you can't say that.
Speaking of which, I just want just as a quick aside, I did not realize that. What's her name? Hochul, the new governor, the temporary governor of New York. I didn't realize that she's a baptized Catholic, another disgraziat Catholic. She's trying to facilitate women, travel for women to go from Texas to New York so that they can have an abortion.
But that doesn't shock me. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, people don't have that deep-seated faith anymore. I mean, I could just speak for my parish. The CCD program just started up, and the mass was packed today. Mm-hmm. But they have to go to mass to go to CCD. Right. Parents don't look. A lot of parents don't consider teaching the faith the primary thing that they have to do for their kids. They don't see a value in it. They're ticking the box. That's a big mistake, because I got news for you. The world's going to chew those kids alive. Right. People who don't have a belief in God, I got news for you. The world pummels you. Right. God is the navigator. You have an anchor in the world, but people don't see that. And that's why people don't have this, Joe. That's why conservatives fold. That's why Republicans fold. They don't have that faith. Joe, they don't have it. They don't have it.
I'm going to tell you something, okay? Now, and I don't know his heart. I know he's not a baptized Catholic, okay? When you look at, let's say, the quote unquote conservatives, okay, in the House, I got nothing against them, let's say, as people. I like MTG. She's a nice counterbalance to AOC, okay, if you want to play the whole alphabet soup type thing, all right? I think somebody like her, dropping truth bombs and confronting the left in the House of Representatives, I think it's a good thing. Okay, I do. All right. At least she's got courage. At least she's got some stones. But think of it this way. Think about the difference between what we're talking about. Everybody in the House, even amongst fiery conservatives, people who we agree with, okay, they're still doing or looking for political solutions to our problems, thinking that somehow, some way, if they could just get the right legislation through, that's going to work and everything's going to be fine. Juxtapose that with Donald Trump accepting the Republican nomination on the White House lawn, and the person singing the song behind him is singing Ave Maria. Now, don't think for 1 second, for a split second, that Trump did not know that singer was going to be singing Ave Maria. He did.
Now, no, I get it.
But my point is that, love or hate Donald Trump, okay? I thought, and you could call that a symbolic gesture if you want, okay? But the idea is that singer was still praying the Hail Mary in song while President Trump was accepting the Republican nomination. And I see it on just a little bit of a deeper level. I know some people might not agree with me on that, but I think it was important. And it's that type of example, I think, that's important. that and it shows him because he had the stones to fight them for 4 years. Okay. And in the meantime, he's not afraid to stand in front of a church holding the Bible because he understands that this is a spiritual battle. And you have a singer singing a prayer to Our Lady at his acceptance of the Republican nomination. I think it's important. I don't know about you.
It is, but you know, if it was such a spiritual battle to him, he'd be a baptized Catholic. If it was such a spiritual battle, as Father Imperato said, he'd write an executive order to stop abortion. Like, Trump is not the savior or the Messiah.
Oh no,
there's no one out there. There's no one out. I know you don't think that, but there is no one out there because people are not interested in that Messiah. You know, it's no secret my family were big rosary people, and I was telling my wife consistently Americans choose Barabbas over Christ. Just like when we pray, you know, the what's it called, the glorious mysteries, the third mystery, the crowning of thorns. Consistently people choose Barabbas over Christ. God was standing in front of people and they chose a murderer. We do the same thing. Because why? We're not willing to change, Joe. You see, Christ presented a different way, and people knew he was innocent. Pilate knew he was innocent. He even said it. But Christ was presenting a change, and people were not interested in it. You see, it's the same thing, and that's why it's not a political solution. We will continue to choose Barabbas because we will not bend. And the only thing that's going to make us bend, if you ask me, will be intervention from heaven. Most likely, it will be some form of suffering, similar to the Israelites when they didn't listen to Moses and he brought 40 years of hardship in the desert, trouble, slavery in Egypt. What? To break their will. To break their will. Why did the prodigal son go home? Not because he wanted to. At first, he had to go and live with pigs. And then he came home because his attention, he couldn't get his attention. The father, I am sure, talked to him before he left his house. You know, this is a bad idea, son. This is a bad idea. Okay, Dad, I know everything. Well, that's what we do. Right. And we will continue to choose Barabbas, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, because we won't change. And that's why I'm telling you this right now. Politically speaking, there is no solution to the American problem. The solution.
Go ahead.
No, the solution comes through prayer. And frankly, and through Our Lady of Sorrows. And I'll say one more thing, and Joe, you could have at it.
Please.
Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion, there's a couple of very, very, I thought, significant scenes in it. Many, but for me personally, one of which was Veronica. All hell's breaking loose. Her son is crying, and she just calms him. She's completely at peace because she sees the victory. What's going on didn't faze her at all. I thought that was very significant. And at the end, Mary clinches her fists with dirt, and then she lets them go. Like, I thought that was a very, very interesting. It wasn't biblical, but I thought it was a great, great like image because she knows the victory. You see, we have to act that way too. All this stuff, to be honest with you, is fluff. It's fluff. We have to stay faithful. And frankly, to not put our faith in men, whether they're Republican, Democrat, whoever, stay faithful. That's the answer.
No, I agree 1,000%. And I know you know this, but just to make it clear for all those listening on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. I'm only giving an indication. I know you know this. That I thought Trump at least outwardly tried to convey the idea that we should be invoking God. All right. Whereas, and I was just comparing that to a lot of those in the House and the Senate who are looking, like I said, for as I mentioned to you, only for political solutions. If somehow, some way, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, all of a sudden America is going to be a different place. Joe, America is going to be exactly the same. In New York and
Agreed.
California, in New Jersey, babies are going to be slaughtered up to the moment of birth. You're going to be gay marriage all over the place. Because remember, a lot of pro-life people, Joe, they don't even mention gay marriage. They don't even mention gender ideology. I know they're against it, but they don't even mention it. To them, it's always about abortion because they don't get it. Again, like you said, you brought up a good point. I want to come back to it. Anybody who has a grasp of the history of the last 2,000 years has to be, no matter how angry we get at times. And Joe, you and I get angry on this show. There's a lot to get angry at, but at the end of the day, it's righteous anger. I do have a calm, I will say. Okay, I have to struggle sometimes to make sure I remain calm, but I do have that calm, and I know that you do too, because of what you said. Why? Because we understand, particularly as Catholics, what the church has been through at different times in her history, dealing with Roman emperors, communist dictators, okay, and everybody in between, okay, European princes, all right, and the whole 9 yards. There is a calm that you described about Veronica, where we have bedlam, chaos, the disintegration of logos in America. We don't have any of it yet. We're still relatively calm people because we have hope, we have confidence. God's not going to lose. Think God's going to lose? I know the left thinks that that's possible. It's not. The godless left thinks that they could defeat the church. They could defeat objective moral values. They could defeat, destroy the family. I know that they in their hubris, if you want to call it that, okay, if that's a proper word, in their hubris, I'm sure they believe that. Obviously, they're wrong. I want to give if I may, Joe, I want to point to something else along these lines that Griffin pointed out in this article, if that's okay.
Sure.
He says, and this is why I like talking about this, because I think it's an important message for people to hear. That's why we're talking about it at the front line with Joe and Joe. This is a quote from Mr. Griffin. The Blessed Mother could not fix anything on Good Friday. What was she going to do, Joe? Stop the crucifixion? Stop the beating that Jesus took on Good Friday? Could she have intervened and prevented that from happening? On Holy Saturday, she could do absolutely nothing but weep over the destruction that was imposed on her son's body. There was a deep loss that she experienced, far more than anyone can imagine. She was not simply virtuous, and her strength was not summarized by perseverance, but by trust in God. If you can't see that anything we go through now is nothing compared to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and how Mary endured that, and yet, as Mr. Griffin points out in this article, Joe, she could fix nothing on Good Friday. She could fix nothing on Holy Saturday, okay? But she knew what was to come on Easter Sunday. We need to get that through our heads. We need to get that through our heads. We could fight the good fight, okay? We stand up and we do what we're supposed to do and obligated to do, as the church tells us. But at the end of the day, remember something. Our main job is to invoke divine assistance in these struggles. And perhaps ask and pray and fast for direct divine intervention. That's what I think. That's what I take away from Mr. Griffin in that piece there.
But also, to quote Mother Teresa, she said, ours is to be faithful, not necessarily to be successful. Something Mother Teresa tried to do, and her order still hasn't accomplished it, is to have a house in China. They won't let her. They came close. They won't let her. They pray for that consistently. God hasn't willed it. Why? Well, that's God's deal. And this is something that Mike Church, we're on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online, he talks a lot about. He talks about building your own kingdom. What does he mean? Worry about your kingdom, your household. Ensure that people are focused on what's important. God, be faithful. Courage is contagious. Courage is a virtue from the Holy Spirit. We have to worry about our own house. What do I mean by that? Are you praying? Are you living a sacramental life? Is your marriage sacramental? You see, this is what is going to give you courage. This is what's going to, like, you talk about people who don't have, like, that they, like, they're feckless. Well, I would say is your work grounded in your prayer? Like, are you going to confession? Are you praying the rosary?
Joe, can I cut you off for 1 second?
Sure.
I want to stay on that for a second. I think it's important. Okay. You're exactly right. And believe me, I'm not diminishing what you're saying at all. Joe, we got to, in order to get the people to the point where they're praying, okay, and they're taking care of their home. We had this conversation with Tim Gordon recently, okay? Joe, it's hard enough to get them to put down the porn. It's hard enough to get men to not try to get away from their families, but spend more time with their families. It's hard enough to get the family intact. And the same people, sorry, Joe, I know this is going to sound judgmental. A lot of the people that complain about the destruction of the family are not doing the things to at least get them to the point where they're not doing now destructive things. We know that what you're talking about is incredibly productive. Prayer, fasting, spending time with the family, turning off Netflix, getting rid of Netflix and HBO and the rest of it. Reading scripture at night rather than watching TV, reading scripture with your kids, okay? It's hard enough to get to the point where they won't put things down. If we want to get on the right foot, you're exactly right. People should be praying. But we have to fight that battle first to try to, particularly men, draw them out of this. I don't even know what to call it. There's the cultural rot that they're letting into their own homes. And yes, Tim Gordon makes a good point, and we've said it on the show a million times. You got to get rid of the porn. Not just the hardcore porn, the softcore porn that you get on HBO and the rest of it. You got to put that stuff down. You got to turn off the TV. Joe, how about this for an idea? You got to turn off Fox News, okay? Let alone CNN and MSNBC. If we could get people to at least start to listen to us with that, perhaps they would realize the importance of then filling that time with God. But we got to get rid of that stuff at either first or at least as we're trying to, tell people about the importance of prayer and turning to God. Joe, that's the rot that's come into our homes. If every family, Joe, if every family in America was acting like a family, okay, a true good and functioning family, okay, then things could get a lot better. And that would be doing God's will because we're supposed to be taking care of our families.
But people have to see the fruit of it. You see, man believes what he sees. Like, it's like, the seed, which is God, is only so good as the soil it goes in. You could have the greatest seed. If it goes in bad soil, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
We have to cultivate the soil. That's our job. And then it bears fruit and people see it. You see, that's how the change is going to take place. That's why I always say only saints change the world. I'm going to tell you this, in my view, one of the most efficacious things that I do, where I see it in people's face. And you may think that this is kind of weird. It's at church on Sunday with my crazy brood of kids, my pregnant wife, and we're struggling to keep our kids in line. I have 4 kids under 7. My wife is pregnant. Who's picking up this one, that one, this one. And then at the end, we're usually the last people to go up for communion. I'm carrying one, holding another. My wife is heavily pregnant, carrying one, another one standing next to her. People see that. These are Catholics. I see it in their face. And they're almost just like, I kid you not, like their mouth is wide open. That is it may be the most efficacious thing that I do. And why do I say that? People have to see the faith lived. I'm going to tell you this. The Catholic Church on paper is perfect. But the Catholics, including me, we're so screwed up. You see, people don't see it. They have to see it. Right. And they have to then see joy. And when they do, they'll be like, damn, I am missing out.
Yeah,
I'm missing out. And that is what's going to change the culture. It's not going to be a Republican and it's not going to be a Democrat.
Amen, brother. Amen. You're listening to The Frontline with Joe and Joe. Let's take a break. You're on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Please become a premium member. We encourage everyone to do so. You should spread the word to your friends, spread it on social media. Being a premium member of the Crusade channel is going to get you Mike Church, King Dude, Kennedy Hall, the whole 9 yards. So from sun up to sundown, the Crusade channel is the last live radio station standing. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello, way in the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. The live chat room, the only social media out there worth actually socializing in, is online at crusadechannel.com/chat. We emphasize to everyone to become a Crusade Channel premium member. Got to be a premium member. You got to support, get the money away from HBO, Netflix, Showtime, and the rest of it. Start giving it to good Catholic media companies. Well, the Crusade Channel is one of them. Joe and I both support the Crusade Channel. We would encourage everyone else out there to do so also. Joe, you mentioned that over the weekend when my wife and I went to Mass, along the lines of what you're saying, you want to talk about. Now, I've seen big families before, Joe, so it's not new to me, okay? You would think I might not necessarily be immediately moved because I've seen your family, okay, quite frankly, in Mass, at times where we have been at Mass together. I saw a pregnant, similar to your situation, very similar. A pregnant mom, she's got 5 kids, the father sitting on the floor. He left the pew because church was packed. It's a small chapel. Church was packed. There was just one bench in the back. Okay. That's all that was available. And the father was sitting on the floor. It's along the lines of what you're saying. People see that. I know I saw that. And I said to myself, that's a real man. The guy sitting on the floor, what you're doing when you walk, I don't blow smoke at you, Joe Resinello. I respect you tremendously because of the type of guy you are. I've seen you in Mass before, especially with my godson. So I know how it is, but people do respond to that. You're right. So when the culture and the rot out there, okay, this wasteland, as Eliot would have called it, of a culture that we live in, when they poo-poo the idea of big families, okay, what you said is right. People respond and say, well, that's a big family right there. They look like they're doing pretty good. In other words, maybe I want to get me some of that. I think it's very important. The example, your point about being a good example, you're right. People need to see it.
We have to do that because we don't, here's the thing again, on paper, if you read, like the teachings of the church, the lives of the saints, it's perfect. It's perfect. But what's perfect and what's in practice is so far from each other. And that's going to do us no good. You see, that's why we have to work on ourselves and our family. And that's what Mike's talking about. He's saying, build your kingdom. Well, your kingdom's in your house. And you do that. And this is where Our Lady of Sorrows, different devotions, because basically our will in God's grace is what allows that to happen. I'll be honest with you, Joe, and this is the God's honest truth. If I wasn't a practicing Catholic, there is no way I would have 5 kids. I'm just being this is just a fact.
Right.
Like God gives you, not only opens your eyes to the truth, but he gives you the grace to do it.
Right.
And that comes through prayer. Like, this is where people have to see that. Too many times we as Catholics react differently than the world. Like, this is even people that go to church. There's no difference between us and the world. And that's why the world isn't aware of Christ.
That's what bothers me so much that bothers me so much, Joe Resinello, when I hear those who identify as Catholic, or even those who are lapsed Catholics, right? When I hear that, I want to tell them, listen, if you don't want to be Catholic, or if you disagree with the Catholic Church on something, then why don't you just do everybody else a favor and shut your mouth? How's that for a Norkism? Shut your face, okay? When Melinda Gates says, well, I, along with a lot of other Catholic women, we don't agree with the church teaching on abortion. Nobody gives a crap, Melinda, okay? You're a scandal. Shut your mouth. You don't agree with contraception, you're going to have to deal with Jesus Christ. But you're causing scandal. and you think that you're convincing other Catholic women that it's okay to disagree with the church on contraception. Again, shut your mouth. I would at least respect them a little bit more if they didn't agree with church teaching. Okay, maybe prayed on it a little bit, but in the meantime, shut their freaking pie hole, because it really is annoying. People like her and others. Just shut up if you don't agree with church teaching. Okay, just shut up. And if you're not going to live by church teaching, okay, again, don't infect other people with that. All right, don't hurt other people's faith.
Well, and what it is, you tell a tree by the fruit it bears. And frankly, when people live according to God's will, laid out very clearly in the Catholic Church, frankly, their lives work. I'm telling you right now, their lives work. They have marriages, not just, just because you stay married doesn't mean people have a good marriage. Many marriages, it's just an endurance contest. In all honesty, men don't, I work with men that frankly, they work a lot, not because they want to work a lot. They don't want to go home. Like, don't think that's very real in corporate America. Men,
right.
they just work because they don't want to go home.
Well,
so I mean, like,
go ahead.
No, but like, we have to be different. You see, people should know. You don't even have to say your life is different. Like, and to be honest with you, they see that you're still joyful. They see that your life is fruitful. Then the culture will change. You see, that's what we have to bank on. I loved, and speaking on the theme of what's it called, Our Lady of Sorrows, I was so very impressed with Cameron O'Hearn. For those who don't know who he is, he came out with a movie on the Latin Mass. And to be honest with you, I was so impressed with him based upon one thing he said. And he's obviously an advocate of the Latin Mass. And, we've seen some changes within the church that have basically put some boundaries around the Latin Mass. And this is why I was so impressed with Cameron. He said, if the Latin Mass was taken away, what would you do? He was like, I wouldn't leave the church. I would deal with it. In sorrow, I would suffer. You see, I thought that was a very Catholic response, and I had a lot of respect for him for saying that, because he trusts in God. God will work through that, and God's going to work through America. That's what Our Lady of Sorrows is about. When we pray the rosary, the last mystery of the glorious mystery, the last mystery of the joyful mystery is the finding Jesus in the temple.
Yeah.
And in that mystery, Mary is confused. Why did you do this, my son, to me? Why did you leave me? I always think about that when I pray that, because she didn't have all the answers. She didn't know, but she trusted. You see, it's the same thing. It's even like what we do here. You always mention, Joe, many times, like we put things, we risk things by saying what we do. And to a degree we do, but I trust God.
Right.
I don't worry about this. I swear, I don't think about it at all, because God has always opened doors for me. He'll help me. He knows what I have to do. I'm trying to take care of my family. He knows that more than I. And I try to be faithful to him, so he'll be faithful to me.
Right.
It's the same thing. Mary didn't understand why Christ left her as a young boy to go into the temple. For 3 days, he was gone, but she trusted. You see, that's kind of what we have to do. Worry about your kingdom, as Mike Church would say. Work on your holiness. And to be honest with you, it will bear fruit. And if everyone did that, I got news for you. The country would change.
Well,
and you would
see changes that everybody is calling for, Joe, will actually come to fruition. The abolition of abortion, protection of the family, saying no to the LGBT juggernaut, and gender ideology, all of it, the race hucksters who try to separate people and divide people, you'll get what you want. You'll get what you want for our nation. If you really want to be, this is another question, Joe, if you really want to be a good and prosperous and blessed nation, but that also, and we don't have to get into it now because we've spoken about it before, but we also have to put down certain things that I dare say even a lot of good God-fearing Christians aren't going to be willing to put down. And needless to say, you know where I'm going with that, particularly contraception and the contraceptive mentality. Joe, let's move on.
Okay.
I want to try to get to a few things. Let me just, if you don't mind, Joe, I want to finish by one thing. Thomas Griffin said, "Let us bear the crosses that come our way and the hardships that we see in our culture as opportunities to become entrenched in the gaze of Jesus Christ, like Our Lady of Sorrows." That's
Amen.
a great way to end that. Amen. Amen. If we could do that, it's not easy. Nobody ever said it was easy. It's not easy. But you want to know what? With God's grace, we could do anything. And that's the truth. So you're listening to the Front Line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, way in the breach. We're trusting in Our Lady of Sorrows. And I'm at Joe. What I'm going to do is this week, I'm going to talk to my wife, and we're going to pray a novena to Our Lady of Sorrows. I think it's a good idea. And we ask her for her help, not just for ourselves and our families, but also for our nation. So now let's pivot, Joe, at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Let's pivot to work. Okay. Joe, I don't know what to think about work anymore. You got the left. You know, there is I don't know what their version of work is. They want to give people universal basic income. You got the right wing. I'm sorry, there's right wing oligarchs, people that want to they support policies like abortion and gay marriage and open borders because they know that's going to drive down wages. They're destroying work in America. Joe, where are we at? Because it doesn't seem to me like we're honoring the dignity of work.
Well, Marco, as Joe said in the intro, Marco Rubio wrote an article in First Things, another great periodical. I subscribe to that as well. Some really good articles in that magazine. And he talks about honoring the dignity of work. I'll just give you a little taste of it. He says, this is Rubio, "Our country faces a fundamental question emerging from the pandemic. Will we renew the promise of a free economy that provides our people with well-paying jobs, or will we increase government payouts and benefits to cover up our failures?" 40 years ago, St. John Paul II issued an encyclical, Laborem Exercens. Was that an Archie Bunker pronunciation? It very well could have been, but I gave it my shot.
You could have done it a lot worse.
That's Latin, through work. Basically, he argued that human work is a key, probably the essential key to the whole social question. John Paul II does not tell us what policies to adapt to meet our challenges, but he is very clear our goal should be to promote, provide, and honor work. Now, I could speak for myself. I've been unemployed in my adult life, and I have worked for the majority of my adult life, if not, 95% of it. I feel better. I never want to retire. Some people say, I can't wait to retire. I never want to retire. I'll work till I can't work. I feel better when I work. I just do. This is just me. I can't speak for other people. And here's another thing. What I do for a living, I work at a bank as a compliance officer. I mean, clearly it's not, I do it because I do it for money. I'm not going to lie. It provides me with, it's not horrible. I don't hate it, but it's not something I dreamed about. But I do it for money, and I still will work as long as they'll have me, because I feel better about myself. When you work hard all week, on Friday, you feel good. It's like there is no weekend if there is no week. There is no Easter Sunday if there's no what's it called? Good Friday. It's just human nature. You see, man, sometimes doesn't figure that out. That's why I'll be honest with you. One of the advantages, and believe it or not, New Jersey is in a perfect place. But one of the good things about New Jersey, four seasons. They're true seasons. And I've learned to love that. People say, oh, I love the nice weather. People say maybe who live in Southern California, perfect weather, no humidity, 5 degrees all the time. Well, guess what? That gets old after a while. You need a cold day to enjoy the spring. The first fall day when the leaves are coming down and the breeze is going through the air, through your hair, you feel, oh gosh, it's beautiful outside. No humidity. Summer's gone. We need that to work. It's healthy. And, here's a guy, you talk about Trump. Trump had really good unemployment numbers, very low. I mean, the unemployment rate was very low. Biden seems to be like, to be honest with you, it's bribing people. You're giving them money. You know, sadly, and what is it? It's just a little bit of money. It's funny, Joe, since Biden, because I have 4 kids, I'm expecting my 5th in 2 weeks. Do you know that I have gotten checks deposited through my taxes into my bank account since Biden has been, I swear. And I'm going to be honest, I don't even need the money. Like $600 like at a pop for child supplement. I swear. I laugh to myself when I see it. And I say to myself, this guy is like, it's basically like a bribe, if you ask me.
Well, more nefarious about that. Okay. And we're going to talk more about Rubio's article, but keep in mind this, Joe. I heard somebody say it last week during the week. I forgot whether I was watching something or I was reading something, but it's something we know and something we need to emphasize at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. The attack, just like the family needs to be attacked, Joe, the middle class and upper middle class need to be destroyed if you're a leftist. The middle class and the upper middle class are too independent. And the writer, I believe it was an article I was reading, the writer says, and this is obvious to some people, but it bears repeating. The super duper rich, okay, well, they're rich and they buy political favors, okay? That's what they do. They're corrupt. They get corrupt politicians and they enrich one another, and they help the politician to maintain power, and the politician, you know, relies on them for money. The poor are completely dependent on the government, okay, particularly in America. So what does that leave? That leaves a vibrant and dynamic middle class based on hard work, some blue collar, some white collar, okay, but nonetheless middle class, solidly middle class, that is independent. We don't need the government to lead our lives, but we're not powerful enough to buy politicians, okay? In other words, now maybe if we came together as groups, all right, unions used to do that. That's why unions had power. Now, unions have a lot of problems, don't get me wrong, okay? But let's talk about just unions in general as a concept. That's a great idea because that brings working class and middle class people together to fight for their own interests, because their bosses are buying politicians that are going to provide, that are going to take care of their interests. You got the left that tries to infiltrate the labor unions, and they did in the 20th century very effectively, I might add. Okay, the communists came into the labor movement in America, but the labor movement and coming together is a good thing. If the unions operated properly, is a good thing. Protects workers, okay, and gives us political power, gives us political influence. All right. And I think that's an important thing, because you have the other two sides, both rich and poor. But the attack on labor, my larger point, again, is deliberate. The left needs to destroy the middle class in order for them to basically reshape America in the form that they want, which is, look, and I use the example a million times at the Crusade Channel. Look, the model they want, Joe, is San Francisco right now. Super duper rich on one end, and guys defecating in the street with hypodermic needles all over the street, okay, on the other end. That's the model that they want.
You see, people hearing you say that would say you're crazy. But in a sense, to be honest with you, the model of that's the third world. That what you just described, Joe, is South America. You have cities like Sao Paulo, you have cities like Buenos Aires, where you have 90% of the people are poor and 10% are super rich. I've been to both those cities and I could attest to it because I've seen it. And I worked on the richer side because I worked in banks. I was doing audits down there. Ultimately, what does that do? It consolidates power. It consolidates their power. And I agree with you. These policies do destroy the middle class, because what you're going to do is you're going to tax the middle class at a higher rate. They say they're not, but they are. And they already are. Like the policies, it's a fact. Nothing is free. And frankly, if you haven't figured that out yet, by 30, you're probably never going to. Money comes from someplace. And ultimately, it's going to take away your autonomy. You're going to be, and frankly, we are more dependent whether we like it or not, on the government because of this stuff. When listen, you're independent as long as you could pay for stuff, Joe. I'm going to tell you this right now.
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. In other words, when you have what used to be, and in our lifetimes we had this. We grew up in neighborhoods where there were local economies. Local economies are destroyed.
Oh, that doesn't exist anymore.
You don't go to the butcher. You go to you go to BJ. Okay, you want to go and buy some sort of widget, whatever it might be for your house. The first thing you do is go on Amazon. All right, or yeah, and that also is destroying work in America. Supporting these big boxes, not willing to pay a couple bucks more for a piece of meat or a product you need because you don't want to buy it at the local store and it's easier to go online and you get the product cheaper. Well, then don't be shocked when wages go down. Don't be shocked when you don't have a middle class that has a real authentic and powerful voice in America. Don't be shocked. No, you'd be surprised. There's some people that do a lot of talking, Joe. Okay, and I know some of them. All right. You know, when it comes to things like this, but as soon as they need to buy something, oh, let me go on Amazon. I've been guilty of it myself in the past. I'm not going to lie, but at least I'm aware of the problem. I'm causing a problem when I buy something from Amazon. I should be shopping locally. But then again, that's the problem. They've destroyed the local economies, so you can't even go shop locally.
In some cases, I hate to say it, Joe, you have no option other than to use Amazon. In some cases.
Let's take a real quick break. We're going to come right back. So you're listening to the Crusade Channel. You're home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, way in the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Joe, you were making a point at the end of the break. I want you to please continue that.
No, but like I'll use India does not allow for big companies to come in. Actually, like they don't permit like Lowe's. They have small, like they still have tailors. That's how they operate, their economy. But our economy has completely changed. And frankly, when the middle class collapses, and it's already getting there. And frankly, why I think a lot of people are buying into this, Joe, we had a generation, my generation, we lived off the fat of the other generation. I'm reading, I mentioned this when we interviewed Tim Gordon on the Veritas Catholic Network, Out of the Ashes by Anthony Eslin. And I was telling my wife, it's always funny that very successful people come from types of families that Eslin talks about that were basically struggling. They learned certain like skills that you don't learn in books. They learned it in the home, and it was as a result of sacrifice. This generation didn't come from that. And that's why, to be honest with you, they're not willing to put in the work. Joe, this is one thing about this country. I'm going to tell you this right now. There's a lot of wealth in America. There's no question about that. But if you are not in the privileged classes, or you're not brilliant, you're normal, Joe, you got to work, and you got to work hard. I'm going to tell you this.
Go ahead.
But people aren't willing to do it.
Well, the thing is, because people have a misconception of what work is. A lot of that was implanted in them by the leftists in Hollywood. See, that's why this article that Marco Rubio wrote in First Things, I think, is a good article, and why it's important that he is alluding to Laborum Exercens, I think I said that right, Pope John Paul II, okay, because we don't have a proper idea of work in America. We don't. It's been like everything else in America. Something that's good has been perverted by the left. So now work is considered drudgery, you see. In other words, it's not something that's got real dignity. It's something that the evil capitalists force you into. Now, that's coming from the left. Of course, the evil capitalists, not all of them, okay, but a lot of them, they support policies, as I said, that drive wages down. So they don't look at the dignity of work. They don't look at their workers as anything other than an entry on the balance sheet. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Why? First of all, in this article, toil is something that is universally known. Joe, we got to get back to that. That's biblical. That's in Genesis. Through the sweat of your brow, you will eat your bread. In other words, but
You're right.
God does honor your work. God dignifies your work. The problem is what God dignifies, particularly the American left, has decided that they were going to pervert, and they have people convinced that going to work is not something that you need to do, or something that you should want to do. And I'm
Well,
with
let's
you, Joe. I'm going to work. I've been a worker since I'm 7 years old. Okay, I'm gonna work because because there is a dignity to it, and and there's a lot of other reasons for it, but the dignity of it, and is something that you cannot diminish. Go ahead, Joe.
let's talk a little bit about that. You say like people have lost the idea of work. Karapi has said this. What are you working for? And also, Out of the Ashes, it made me think of it too. I work for my family. You see, if you work for things, you're a slave. You're a slave. You're working, if you're working for status, you're a slave. I'm telling you this right now. If you work to provide for your children and your wife, you're not a slave. You're free. Like there's a purpose. You see, we become a selfish society. Our society is selfish. People work to basically achieve things, frankly, that in the end don't mean a damn thing. Like,
Right.
and ultimately, when you focus that work on a greater good, which is to educate your children, to provide a roof and stability for your family, work has purpose and it
Right.
has meaning and it gives dignity to yourself. It gives you respect. I'm going to tell you this right now. Men who don't work do not feel good about themselves. I'm going to tell you this right now.
They can say
Any man,
they don't. I agree with you.
any man who tells me like I don't work or I don't have to work, I got news for you. I don't have to know you to know because we're made to work. You don't feel good about yourself when you don't work because I'm just telling you this. It's something like there's something about it. It's built into the person.
Joe, when you sit down and you have a meal in your home, okay, that you went out and you put that food on the table, and it's like, and I've been to your house for meals, so I know how good they can be. Okay, point is, yes, you're right. Okay, it's in you. It's. I mean, it's deep in your mind. It's not like something you might think about when you sit down to eat the meal, but it's part of the way you say, I earned that. I went out and I worked for it. I put it on the table for my family. And yes, that makes, I hate to use the word feeling, but I'll use it for now. That makes me feel good about myself in a very authentic way, not in some superficial way, in a very deep and meaningful way. To when I look at a steak that I have with my wife and I say, I have that because I went out and I earned that. And you're right. The person who eats off somebody else's dime cannot possibly know what that feels like. They could convince themselves that everything's a-okay, but they know that it's not because they're not eating food or buying products that they've actually earned. And that's a problem, Joe.
Oh,
And
it's
that's why I
huge.
think why Rubio wrote this article. That is a major problem in America, a major problem.
You know, like again, I think you have a generation that has thrown up their hands. They've acquired a massive amount of debt to educate themselves. They don't see a future. And frankly, they're not willing to dig in. You see, you have to dig in and make it happen. I can remember a guy who sat next to me, John Dudley from Ohio. He got divorced. He was in his early 40s, and his wife ran up a tremendous amount of credit card debt, and he owned half of it, and he had to pay it off. You know what John did? He moved to Irvington, New Jersey, I swear, and lived there and paid off his debt. You see, you don't see that.
Right.
And then what he did, he bought a house after he got out of debt. You see, we don't have that anymore.
Right.
Joe, if anyone who knows what Irvington, New Jersey looks like, John Dudley was a redheaded, he was a big guy too. I don't think anyone would screw with John. He was probably like 260, 6'3". I'm not exaggerating. But he is, Irvington's a rough place. It's very cheap. He moved into a townhouse right off the Parkway. Low rent. He did it for a while. He paid off his debt. You see, we don't have that anymore.
Right.
This generation doesn't have that. People who went to war, like you look at like my grandfather. My grandfather had no shot at an education and was smart. Went into the Marine Corps. He was a cook in the Marines. Came out. He worked 2 jobs to support his family. Dude, he worked 18 hours a day.
Right.
He had a job. He had a diner. And then he worked as a janitor for Prudential. And would come home. My mother used to say, he used to come home, he'd sleep in a chair. And then he'd get up and go to the diner that he owned in South Kearney. The point is, this generation was not raised like that.
No.
And this is why they're taking the handouts. They take the $1,200 stupid ass check that Joe Biden gives you. What good is it?
But Joe,
Keep it, Joe. I don't want it.
I know. Listen, you're preaching to the choir because I agree with you 1,000%. But you got to remember something. On the one hand, you have this giveaway culture, okay, that wants to convince all these young kids or the younger generation that a transfer payment of some kind, call it universal basic income, call it welfare, whatever the case might be, is something that they should be in favor of. But I can't honestly entirely blame them. And this is where I blame the right, because they're so anti-organized labor. They're so anti-workers coming together, not as Marx said, to workers of the world unite. That's all you have to lose is your change. We're not talking about Marxism and communism, but it just seems to me that it's A-OK when businesses come together in the Chamber of Commerce and business associations. All the business owners come together and they lobby politicians for their own interests. But it seems that it's all of a sudden communist or socialist when workers say, we want to come together and we want to protect our rights and we're going to lobby for what we want. And the problem is, again, you have the attack on work from the left, but you also have the attack on work from the right. There shouldn't be an argument in this country about a minimum wage of $15 an hour. Wages should be well above $15 an hour in this country, given the amount of wealth we have. And I mean organically. I'm not talking about imposed by the government. But what do you have? Let's talk about this for a minute, okay? Let's stay on this for a minute. You have abortion, which wrecks the family. You have, or put it like this, you have contraception and the contraceptive mentality and all its attendant features. Abortion, the destruction of the family, you have gay marriage, you have gender ideology, all those things that's meant to wreck the family. You have open border advocates, both on the right and the left, because they want the left wants the open border because they want power. The right wants the open border because they want cheap labor. Okay, you have at least President Trump tried to impose tariffs and rework the NAFTA and our trade agreement with China. Okay, why? In this wealth, this unprecedented wealth that we have in America, Joe, you shouldn't be arguing about a minimum wage. Wages for normal work should be in the 20s, $20 an hour with benefits anyway. But you have all these extraneous factors, okay, that are caused by the policies that have come out of both leftist and right-wing politicians. And what's the idea of it? They both are designed to drive wages down. And when you drive wages down to the point where you can't go out and work one job and raise your family, Joe Resinello, okay, then it also destroys the dignity of work. Then it does become drudgery, all right, rather than something that I can wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to the plant, the warehouse, the construction site, whatever the case might be. I'm making a really good living. I'm providing for my family, and I'm happy to do so. So it's not, you can't just blame the left, is what I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm
agree.
not saying you are, because the right has done an amazing job at diminishing work. Hence, one of the reasons why I was surprised to see that it was Marco Rubio, who has become a lot more mainstream, okay, as a senator over the last several years. Okay, I was surprised to see him write this article. I think it's an important one. I'll be honest with you. It's a conversation that needs to be had.
I agree. I think obviously it's distorted, but it's also why I think that the question, like when I read this in the margins of the article that I wrote, is why do we work? That's something we have to ask ourselves. Why do we work? Like, are we working? Is it a means to an end? Like, are we working for our families, or are we working to enrich ourselves? Our goals to buy the bigger house, the better car. Are we building our kingdom here? We have to work. Listen, you got to work. It's just part of life. This isn't heaven. Listen, all you Catholics out there who tune in, I know we got a lot of Catholics that listen to us. This isn't heaven. It's never going to be. Never. This is the valley of tears. This is the way it is. There's a lot of things that you're not going to like. It's part of the deal. We're here to fight the good fight. We're here to be in the world, but not of the world until Jesus comes back. And part of that is you got to work.
Right.
You got to work. And you got to, and here's the thing. It's not always going to be fun.
No.
And at the end of the day, though, if you do it, it gives meaning to your life. It gives dignity. It shows your children by example that this is what you have to do. It's part of being in the valley.
Right.
And frankly, there is no out and there is no big daddy. And frankly, when you work, and this is why I like the Trumpian model versus the Joe Biden model, to be honest with you, is you're independent. I work for my money. I'm not a slave. When someone gives you money, I got news for you. They tell you what to do.
That's right. They tell
you what to do. And this is the problem with politicians. Joe, I'm telling you, this is the problem with unions. This is the problem with even this idea of universal income. There are many people who will say, oh, that's a great idea. No, it's not. You become a slave. They're going to tell you what to do. And they know this.
Right.
I don't want to be told what to do from the government. I want to be, as Mike Church, the King Dude, we're on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. I want to be the king of my kingdom. It's my money. I worked for it. I pay my bills. I give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, i.e., I pay my taxes.
Right.
But then I do what I want to do, i.e., I have to be a steward of the gifts that are given to me. That's another conversation for another day. But I want to be in control of my money. It's my capital. I earned it. You see, I don't want any help from the government. I don't want anything. And here's another thing. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I am not in that top 5% of the smartest people on the earth that can get a job anywhere and make tons of money. I have to grind it out. And have grounded out my whole damn life.
Right.
And frankly, you can in America do that. I know tons of people who aren't as gifted as I am. Not that I'm super gifted, but simply just grind it out and make a living. That's what makes America great. You take that away, Joe Pasillo, this country's no different than any country in the world.
This is where I will say about the left, Joe Resinello, but at least we know with the left, that is their goal. That is what they want. In other words, they want everybody. Look, we all know that. We talked about it a million times, the long march through the institutions, destroying all the intermediary institutions that stand between the individual and the raw power of the federal government. We understand what their goal is. Now, one of those things that they need to destroy is work. I do want to stay on this article for the rest of this segment, Joe Resinello on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. I'm surprised because Rubio, like I said, has become a bit more. He was, by the way, he was voted in as a senator in the Tea Party wave. Okay. And he became increasingly mainstream. Again, I'll give him credit for writing this article because I think it's a little gutsy on his part because there's a lot of Chamber of Commerce types down in Florida that are not going to like some of the things he said. I want to focus on one. He says the principle of the priority of labor over capital. Okay. Now, this is where the Sean Hannitys of the world's brain explodes. Okay, this is where the Ben Shapiros, all right, their brains explode because they think when you say something like that, automatically you're speaking either communistically or socialistically, and you're not. In his first, now this is Rubio, in his first annual message to Congress, President Abraham Lincoln wrote, quote, labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not existed first. Labor is superior to capital and deserves much higher consideration. Now, you can have an argument, I think, okay? And good people could say, well, okay, yeah, businesses need to thrive. John Paul II said that also in his encyclical Centesimus Annus, okay, on the 100th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, talking about these same things, okay? John Paul II said, if you don't have a profit as a corporation, then as an enterprise, okay, then you're a failure. In other words, the health of the corporation is measured by its profit, okay? So the Pope gets that. But it's the way that work is treated. See, Marx had an idea that all of human history was a history of class struggle. Okay, now I'm not sure, and I've always just poo-pooed that idea. But he definitely was on to something in this regard. Okay, and I've thought about this a lot over the last few years. Okay, especially since I became and started to become a more practicing Catholic and get away from the political and economic ideology of, let's say, as a conservative, Joe Rossinello, is that if labor is not prior to capital, if labor does not take priority, if, as E. Michael Jones says, labor is the source of all value, okay? If that's false, then how come every single government, oligarch, slave owner, whoever the case might be, is always constantly trying to do the same thing, which is steal another person's labor? It comes in different forms. Sometimes it's outright slavery. The Romans employed slave labor to enrich themselves. Okay. Sometimes it's outright slavery. Sometimes it's theft of our wages and our labor through confiscatory taxation. Sometimes it's creating a whole class of slavery, of slaves in communist societies. If labor is not primary, then why is it that guys like us and all the good people out there, why are the policies that are set by the government and employed by the oligarchs always designed to do one thing? Enrich them. And how do they enrich themselves? By stealing our labor. It leads me to believe that labor is primary over capital. Because if it wasn't, why do they constantly try to steal it from us, Joe?
Well, they do, but there's a lot of things we could do to stop it. In this country, Ben Shapiro said this. I'll never forget it. And he's right. He said, poverty has nothing to do with race in America. Poverty has everything to do with three things. And actually, James Carville has said similar things, not exactly to Ben Shapiro, and he's a Democrat. James Carville, as a Democrat, I heard in an interview recently with Raymond Arroyo, he said, you want to succeed in life? Get married once, stay married, go to school, stay in school. That's what a Democrat said. A Democrat. This is what Ben Shapiro said, who is conservative and an Orthodox Jew. He said, in America, if you get a high school education, if you get married once and stay married, and you work, you will not be poor. And he's right, because I know my parents are people. Joe's parents, same thing. I know tons of people. That is a fact. That is a simple, solitary fact. I know black families. I grew up in a town where there was a thriving Baptist church and a black community around that church. I know I had friends, Greg Harris, good friends with my whole life. People who went to that church, parents, good families, they are no different than me. Went to college, have jobs, they're healthy people. In America, if you do those things, you will have, no one's going to put you on the lifestyles of the rich and famous. You will eat, you will have a roof over your head, and you will be able to provide for your kids.
But Joe, here's the thing. We have to then I'm thinking about this as we're speaking. Okay, then what we have to do is we have to prevent the ideologies from defining what work is, both on the right and the left. That the communists can't define what work is, and the right wing can't define what work is. We need to establish policies in America that are going to strengthen the family, so that women who do not want to be in the workforce don't have to be in the workforce, because many don't, Joe. Many women are in the workforce because they have to be, quite frankly. Okay, close the border. Okay, and stop the cheap labor coming in. Protect our economy. Yes, protectionism, all you conservatives out there, is not a terrible thing. Okay, and let wages go up, not 3%, but significantly more than that. We covered it a few weeks ago, Joe. 40 years ago, the average construction worker made $35, $40 an hour. Now the average construction worker makes about $15 an hour. And there's a cause for that, is what I'm saying, Joe. There's
there
a
are
cause
problems,
for that.
Joe. There are tons of problems. I mean, even the instability. How do you have a family now? Even if you're a high earner, there was a time I had an uncle. He was an accountant. He went to Seton Hall University, where, Joe, you went. He worked for Shearing Plow for 40 years, over 40 years. He lived in Kenilworth, and Shearing Plow was in Kenilworth, New Jersey. There is no stability. You see, there's a ton of problems in the economy. We could talk about that, ad infinitum, what hurts, the family and keeps things unstable. I mean, we could talk forever about that.
Hold the thought, Joe. Hold the thought. I want to come back to right there, okay? You're listening to the Crusade Channel. You're home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession from sunup to sundown. Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Welcome back, everyone, to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We are in the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Please become a premium member at the Crusade Channel. You get the entire lineup. You need to do so. Joe and I are both premium members on the Crusade Channel, and we encourage all of you good people out there to do so. Also, Joe, with that, I want you to finish your thought with it. You were at the end of the last segment.
No, but I mean, in America, it can be done. I mean, I live next door to two immigrants from Eastern Europe, one from Poland, one from the former Czech Republic. Why do they own houses? Why? One of which, they're not even here 25 years, because they're married. They're stayed married, and they both work hard. You see, it can be done in America. Are you willing to do it? You see, America allows you to do this. And to be truthful with you, that's why I don't want your money. And believe me, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I can't make money anywhere. I can't go to Arkansas and make money. I make money because I live near New York City, and I work in a financial field and I work hard. I mean, in half, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
This, it can be done. You see, this is where, again, no politician could change the minds of these people. You see, it's got to be hardship, Joe. We're going to go through a dark period. America getting back to the Our Lady of Sorrows, and then maybe we'll shake out of it. Countries go through dark periods. We're a new country. I mean, in terms of years, you talk about England. It's been around a lot longer as an empire than America. Mm-hmm. I mean, people have to feel the burn. We've become too soft.
Joe,
America is just a soft country. The people are soft.
I think that the softness is leading to our destruction. In fact, I don't think America is going to survive this. I don't. I think it's going to go one way or the other. I mean, it'll survive if it goes our way. It won't really survive if it goes the other way. And one of the things that you could look at from the past that point to this pessimism on my part is that growing up, when you saw the fathers, they all had good jobs. They either owned a small business like your old man, he owned a barber shop, okay, or they had a good union job, okay. They weren't, a lot of fathers weren't driving Cadillacs and things like that. No. But guess what? They had cars, they had a home, all right. They could go to Alphonse the Butcher on the weekends and go buy some cold cuts and some bread at Calandras and things like that and have a good time, all right, and relax on the weekends, okay. They had good jobs and everybody knew they had good jobs, all right. I know my father was a Teamster, and my friend's father was in construction. My other friend's father worked as a longshoreman. My other friend's father worked down in air freight. All union jobs, all good jobs. I remember the Bryants. They were neighbors of mine. We were friends with them growing up. 8 kids. German family, all right, Mr. Bryant. Worked at United Airlines with one of my father's friends in air freight. 8 kids, own a house on 11th Street in Newark. 8 kids, Joe. You got people complaining now because they have 2 kids and they think it's too much. And these are people with degrees. Mr. and Mrs. Bryant didn't have degrees. The
Because
mother
we
was
don't
an
know how,
immigrant.
Joe,
It's different.
because we don't know
That's
how to
why Joe, it's a
live.
different mentality.
We don't know how to live anymore. I mean, like, this is the thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's all about how you structure your life. Like, we buy things we can't afford because we don't know who we are. And this is what I mean. No politician can fix this. We've bought the lie. We've bought the lie. That's one of the themes. Again, I'll reference Anthony Eslin, Out of the Ashes. He talks, that's his first chapter of the book, The Lie. It's taught from the ground up, from grammar school through college. We've all bought into it. And frankly, it's destroying us. And so many people, you're slaves to it. Yeah. You're slaves to the lie. Yep. We don't know how to live anymore as people. Like we basically structure and overburden ourselves with debt. People talk about, like, I can't sleep at night. Oh, of course you can't sleep at night. Your mortgage, you have an $8,000 a month mortgage. You have 2 cars, leases, right. $1,100 each. I remember during the mortgage crisis, this is like when people were flipping houses. My friend told me this. This is his exact words, who had a high-paying job, by the way. He was a trader. He said, Joe, if I lose my job, at the time, I think he had like 3 houses, like he was flipping houses. He goes, I will have to rob a bank to meet my monthly payments. Money is supposed to make your life easier, not harder, but right. We don't understand that right. anymore. And this is why, like I said, only suffering will shake us out of it. It will structure, like, it will focus people back on the family. It will change people like the prodigal son. He'll shift his gaze back to God. No politician is going to do that. Right. Republican, Democrat, whoever's listening to my voice, it's not happening, guys. There right. is no button that you're going to press. People have to feel that. It's like learning how to share. You don't learn how to share by reading a book. You learn how to share in a family right. when you have to share. When there's 6 pork chops on the table and there's 6 people and each person gets 1 and you're still hungry after you finished it. Right. That's how you learn how to share.
Yeah, no, Joe,
and this is what we don't understand anymore. And there's no person who's going to fix it. No, let me strike that. God will fix it because right. He loves us. You see, God sees us, the stiff-necked people that we are who choose Barabbas over Christ. Consistently, we continue to choose Barabbas.
Right.
God sees that, and He says, I have to step in. He steps in through allowing suffering to take place. He allows it because it's the only thing that changes the gaze of man.
I was gonna say, like people complain sometimes, well, why doesn't God do anything? He is doing something. By not doing anything, He's trying to teach you something before He acts. Why don't you recognize what it is? What good is it if God takes away our problems right now, if we don't learn any kind of lesson from it? What good is it? See, that's why God is God. That's why God is a good father, because He knows He's got to let us suffer a little bit. It's the only way we're going to learn. Remember, we're not pets, Joe Resinello. God didn't create toys. God created human beings, okay? We have lives. We're made in the image and likeness of God. He's got to treat us this way because He knows that we're not pets, okay? A pet is somebody you try to relieve their suffering because they're a pet. They don't have reason, intelligence, and free will, okay? But we do. And that suffering is essential. It's the only way we're going to learn. It's the only way we're going to learn. Joe, let's move on.
Okay.
Because we have a couple of things to talk about. I do want to say one final thing about Rubio's article. And again, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, Joe. I'm assuming he really believes this and wants to emphasize the importance of emphasizing the dignity of work. One does not need to be Catholic or even a believer to see the truth of what John Paul II says. Quote, human work has an ethical value of its own. Close quote. Let's turn away from the complacent approach of buying off Americans with cash payments. We must build a more prosperous and fair economy. Well, that's what I'd like to see. That's what Joe Ressinola would like to see. That's what all you good people would like to see out there who are listening to us on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. So, Joe, courage, coraggio. I remember one of the bishops said that a couple years ago. I saw a video to coraggio. We need courage. Joe, Molly Hemingway's got something to say about that.
Yes, she wrote in the Federalist this article, what the right needs now is the courage to fight, even if it costs us. She's 100% right, and this is what she said. Today, everyday Americans are being bullied by the hard left minority that unfortunately has taken over and controls most of the agenda-setting institutions in our country. As someone who works in the media, again, this is Hemingway speaking, I know what it's like to be a lonely voice taking on many of these powerful people. Pat Buchanan, she's quoting Buchanan, says, courage is contagious. Defiance can lead us to recovery of will. It is inspiring to see someone who chooses to risk his well-being for a higher good. Now, why, we talked about this a little earlier, why don't people do this again? Their actions aren't grounded in God. Thomas More had everything. Yeah. He was wealthy, he was smart, and he was powerful. Why did he choose what he chose? Because he believed in God and he believed in him deeply. You see, if you strengthen the faith of America, people would change. And you would see people that Hemingway is calling us, the people she's calling us to be. Now, I see this constantly. You still see people who follow the NFL. Why? Why? They're smacking you in the face. This is the part that kills, not just the NFL, but these companies. They smack you across the face, and you, in thanks for the smack, you make them rich. You see, people, I crack up when I see that. They'll bitch on social media. When's this going to stop? When this going to stop? And then they enrich the oligarchs. Like, because to be honest with you, they're not grounded in principles. Now, do I, to a degree, listen, I'm not perfect. I do use Amazon. I'll be honest with you. When I need something, sometimes I have no choice in the matter. And frankly, sometimes it's easy. I'm not going to lie. I'm not perfect. So let me first say that. But there are a lot of things that we can do. We don't. We simply don't. But why? We're not grounded in principles that are godly. You see, when you are focused on God, he gives you strength. You see, people who did great things, ordinary men don't die for a lie. You don't die for a lie. You don't give up your life for a lie. I'll even use my own life. My life, I'll be truthful with you. If I was a selfish SOB, me and my wife, we wouldn't have 5 kids. We wouldn't be living in a box. I drive a 2002 Toyota. I'm just saying, you don't do that for a lie. You do that for the truth. And who is the truth? Jesus Christ. He rose from the dead. And my place is not this place. It's heaven. Right. And I'm guiding my life towards it. Why do people not do what Hemingway did? Because their life isn't grounded in truth. Because it's not grounded in prayer, in fasting, and that's what allows people to do what she's doing. Because ultimately, even the 12 ran away. You can't do what Hemingway is talking about, to be a lone voice, stand up, basically live a life of sacrifice without the sacraments, without a life of prayer. You'll fold, you'll run, frankly, and that's what we see with the conservatives. I am willing to bet Clarence Thomas, if you ask me, best Supreme Court justice there is. He says, I go to mass every day before I go to work. Right. Why do you think his dissents are on point? Not because he's smart. They're all smart. He's living a sacramental life.
Right.
That's what we have to do. And then you'll see from the smart to the simple doing exactly what she does. Until then, Joe, forget it.
No, I know. And her problem in this article she's focusing. And I think it's important because remember something, Joe, we say all the time, I told the story, many people have heard the story about the scorpion and the frog. The scorpion's going to sting No matter what the scorpion says, the scorpion is going to sting you if you're a frog carrying the scorpion across the river, because the scorpion convinced you that he wasn't going to sting you. Okay. The scorpion's going to sting. The left is going to do what the godless left does. They hate God. They hate those who believe in God. They want their own power. That's all they want. And no matter what they have to do, they get it. That's not the issue. And I'm so happy that Molly Hemingway wrote this article, because she's calling out conservatives. Okay. And it's true, because let's face it, where are courageous conservatives? Conservatives cave. Either they misdiagnose the problem, they deliberately don't want to see what some of our problems are. They won't get there. I know I harp on it, Joe, but I'm sorry, but it bears repeating all the time. Ted Cruz wants to reach across the aisle to AOC to make contraception more available, and then he's the smart one, and he can't see that that's one of the major problems in America. That our problem started with Griswold.
But in all honesty, do you know why? Because he's smart. Actually, because he is smart. He knows that people won't buy it. You see, they cave because the people are not for it. They're still calling for Barabbas, Joe. You see, the conservatives know this.
Right.
You see, you talk about, they know it. Don't think they don't. They're not dumb. It's like marketers, people who are in marketing. Marketing is simply this. They understand human nature better than the consumer does, and they exploit it. That's what a marketer does and an advertiser does. He understands your desires and wants better than you do. And I'm going to exploit you and get rich because of it. The politicians, the conservatives, they know that if they take the hard line, I got news for you, they'll be voted out. They'll be voted out. People still are chanting for Barabbas. They're not interested, Joe. You see, I'm telling you, this is the sad reality. You use in just about every Catholic church outside of a small few, talk about contraception. Talk about structuring your life financially where you could model your finances towards the poor as well as your family. Get out of my face will be the answer of the Catholics. A good swath of them. Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean? That's why I pay taxes. I'm not giving any money to anybody. What do you mean? I'm leveraged. Well, why did you buy that friggin' house? Why did you buy that house? You could have bought a normal house. Why do you have that car? This is what I mean. And this is America. And you expect these people to stand up? They don't even stand up in their own life. And these are the conservatives. And that's why abortion's going nowhere, because they like casual sex too. You think that they're going to vote against Roe v. Wade? No. Holy crap, I got a girlfriend. What if she gets pregnant? I'm cheating on my wife. Holy crap. Dude, this is Barabbas. Free Barabbas continues on. And we think that America's going to get saved by a conservative? Conservative what?
Not the funny thing is, the interesting is we started the conversation at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online, at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. We started talking about Our Lady of Sorrows. Our Lady of Sorrows would have had to have witnessed that too. The people choosing Barabbas. The same people that were hailing Jesus into Jerusalem a week before, choosing Barabbas over Jesus. Our Lady of Sorrows witnessed that too. Okay. And that's something that bothers me. Joe, we're all sinful. Every one of us. St. Peter said to Jesus, Lord, lead me.
I am.
A sinful man. I'm a sinful man, but I got to tell you something, and I have my shortcomings as well as you, but I'm not choosing Barabbas. I'm weak in many cases. I am, but I'm not choosing Barabbas. I'm not. No, and I got to say this.
I get it. I know what you're saying, but let's look at the disciples who fell. They came around. Why did Peter chastise Jesus? Why did they run? And why did Judas deny Jesus? Because his answer, one, wasn't theirs. Okay. And two, it required suffering. You see, Christ was meek and humble. He wasn't a general. and he came on a donkey into Jerusalem to die, and they couldn't accept it.
Right.
You see, this is the thing. You see, the road to heaven is diametrically opposed to the road of worldly success. We have to trust in the Lord, and that's going to require suffering, and it's not going to be pretty. You see, and we want both. We want it both ways. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that. It didn't work then that way, and it doesn't work that way now.
Right.
You see, this is the valley, to be honest with you. And if you want principled people, I always say this. People look at our politicians. They say, oh, they're dogs. They're this. On both sides of the aisle. Let's be honest. Republicans, in many cases, are no better. Why? Well, dude, they represent us. They're a representation. A corrupt people have a corrupt leadership.
Right.
Our people support these people.
Right.
Because they represent, in many ways, the culture. The culture's rotten. It's sordid. It's sordid. And so frankly, people love it.
Well,
Joe.
yeah. Let's take a break.
They eat it up.
Let's take a quick break. We got one more segment left. You're listening to the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, Barrett Brief, and Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello weigh in the breach on the Crusade Channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Joe, I want to wrap this one up only because I want to try to get to, we have one more segment. Try to get to a couple things, okay? But I will say this, Molly Hemingway, she said, I think this is important to note, and I also, Joe, think she might be watching the front line with Joe and Joe. I'll explain in a second. She said Michael Malice has derided, now I like this, she said Michael Malice has derided conservatism as just progressivism with a speed limit. Institutional conservatism and its alleged leaders have too frequently accepted the propagandist press's treatment of conservatives as second-class citizens. Now, this is where I say she's probably watching the front line. She said, all of a sudden, the conservative project is not a conservative one so much as a counter-revolutionary one. That's what we've been saying on the show from the beginning. We're not conservatives as much as we're counter-revolutionaries. The revolution has been going on since the 1960s, well, probably before then, if you want to go back to even as far back as the French Revolution, okay? All these really rotten ideas really came to full fruition around the time of the French Revolution and has been ongoing since then. We're counter-revolutionaries. We're Catholics. We have to be counter-revolutionaries, all right? So we should stop identifying as conservative. Well, what are you? I'm a counter-revolutionary. I don't like the revolution that's been going on in my country for the last, let's just say, 100 years, and I'm rebelling against that. I'm countering that. I think it's a great way to look at it. I think that's what we've been doing here. We have been counter-revolutionary. Molly Hemingway saying, well, you know what? That's the way we should start acting that way and start describing ourselves that way. Because conservatism, as Michael Malice said, well, that's just progressive. Joe, conservatives want to vote for a $1.2 trillion budget rather than a $1.5 trillion budget. Both budgets drive us into the poorhouse. Again, it's progressivism with a speed limit, and quite frankly, we don't need that. But let's move on. Where do you want to go, Joe? We only
I don't know. You want to do, it's your call. We could do Donahue. We could do Laura Ingraham. You tell me.
Let's just in case we happen to stay on. Listen, we're on so-called conservatives. Let's stay on conservatives. Let's talk about W.
Okay, that's good. I think it's a great piece. Laura Ingraham, basically, you know, she's entering the front line with Joe and Joe. We don't usually basically cover her show. We should, actually. I think she's, you know, a definite voice out there. Raymond Arroyo, who we have interviewed on Veritas Catholic Network, also joins her on the Ingraham angle. And basically, she noted that President Joe Biden failed to offer public remarks after al-Qaeda terrorists attacked America on September 11, 2001. Obviously, she's talking about on September 11th in New York, that he didn't really say anything. And she said, giving reason why maybe he thought he would get booed, or maybe that if he spoke off script, he would get lost. But this is what she had to say. She said, why would Biden need to speak at all when George W. Bush would do it for him? And this is what Bush had to say. We have seen growing evidence that the dangers in our country do not only go across borders, but from violence that gathers from within. There's little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home, but there is disdainful pluralism in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols. They are children of the same foul spirit, and it is continuing our duty to confront them. Ingram said the 43rd president never once spoke out during the mass violence and rank criminal activity in places like Portland, Philadelphia, Washington, or New York last summer, when they tried to burn down St. John's Church across from the White House. Did Bush decry the defiling of national symbols? Oh, no, no. But when Donald Trump began to slowly but surely call out and dismantle Bush's globalist legacy, he couldn't stop himself. You know, it's typical. Like, I heard that and I just snickered to myself. And he's the one that gave us Roberts, and it's just par for the course. Joe, they're institutional men. Why would George Bush rock the boat? You see, that's one thing I'll give Donald Trump. Does he do it perfectly? No. Donald Trump is a crude guy, to be honest with you. His tweets in many cases are inappropriate for a man who's the president. But one thing that he did do is he shook the pillars of power from both the Republicans and the Democrats in a way that made them all uncomfortable. Why would you want power taken from you? Do you know how rich the Bushes are and powerful and influential? Those family members sit on boards of directors. They're worth so much damn money. Why would they want someone to shake the power that basically feeds them and basically gives them privilege that you and I will never have? He's just another one of them. And frankly, I'm sick of it.
Oh, no, I'm with you on that. I love the fact that Laura Ingraham uses the correct word, globalist. George Bush is an oligarch. Now, I never here's let me tell here. I'm gonna do a confession here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Okay, you know when you go to confession, Joe, and you say to Jesus, I regret these things that I've done. Here, I'm gonna give you 4 things that I regret in my adult political life. Okay, voting for Bush twice, McCain once, and Romney once. Those 4 things politically, I have deep regret for. Why? I'm gonna tell you exactly why. Okay, Bush. I mean, I had this feeling about. I never thought he would do this. Okay, he basically just said that the people that voted for him and put him in power twice are domestic terrorists. Because let's face it, Joe, most of those people that voted for him voted for Donald Trump. Okay. I'm going to throw John McCain into that mix, okay? John McCain, who promised he was going to repeal Obamacare, ran as a conservative. Oh, by the way, getting back to George Bush for a second, the same people Bush just endeared himself to called him Hitler when he was president of the United States. So let's be clear about that. The people he just sucked up to are the ones that called him a fascist and Hitler when he was president. Getting back to McCain. McCain sat there during Trump's first speech, State of the Union. He was rocking back and forth. Somebody overheard him saying Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, Stalin. He was comparing Trump to all those people. And in his hatred for Donald Trump, he stabbed us all in the back by suffering from cancer, gets on a plane, goes to the Senate to vote against repealing Obamacare because he put his own wounded ego ahead of the interests of the American people. So he stabbed us in the back too. And I don't even have to tell you in the last couple of years how obviously Mitt Romney has shown voting for him would have been, it would have been like Michael Malice said. It would have been progressivism with limits. That really, that's what it comes down to, or with a few limits, because Romney would have been no better. And Romney stabbed us all in the back because Romney looks again, I voted for Romney. Romney can't stand the fact that I voted for him, but I also voted for Donald Trump because I don't want their brand of republicanism anymore or their brand of so-called conservatism. But George Bush, to take the occasion of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 to call you and I and people that voted for Donald Trump domestic terrorists, because that's what he was doing, Joe. That's what he was put up there to do by his Democrat and oligarch pals. That's what he was there to do, okay, is so disgraceful. I feel so ashamed that I voted for him twice. So
when you think about it, do you think Thomas More would have done that?
No.
You see, it comes down, you see, what we need are, again, politicians who are there simply to serve. Like, I'm not doing this because it's my job or I care, or how's this? This isn't my kingdom. This isn't my kingdom. Like, I look at my life like that. I'm 51 years old. How much longer am I going to be here, Joe? All honesty, maybe 30 years if I'm lucky. Not everyone lives to be 80.
Right.
It's time goes by. This is not my kingdom. They live like this is their kingdom. They're holding on to their power, to their money. You see, we need godly men, and we don't have them. America doesn't have them. And here's the worst part. America doesn't want them. They don't want them, Joe. Like, don't people. Like, this is where we got to get back. That's why, I'll be honest with you, Joe and I started the Rosary Rally. It is, America needs Fatima. You see, there is no other way, guys. God has to whisper into the ear of men in this country to fix it, because we're not interested in a godly man. I remembered this. I'll be honest with you. I didn't get married till I was 43 years old. And I would meet women, professional women, and people would get to know you. I can't tell you how many times, and I'm not putting myself out to be a saint, because I'm not. Ask my wife. Trust me, I'm not. But there are tons of women. Women will always say, I want to meet a nice guy. No, you don't. No, you don't. I'd meet women. You go on a date, you talk to them. The minute that they perceived that you were a Catholic, that you took your faith seriously, that you believed in God, and that they run away. Mm-hmm. They're not interested in a nice guy. Don't think that they are. Right. It's the same thing with America, Joe.
Right.
You put up Christ again, they reject him and crucify him. They're not interested.
I'm with you. I can tell you off the top of my head, I used to have these conversations all the time. I'm not going to be specific, but I'm not bad mouthing the person. But I remember a girl who dated a really nice guy, and he wasn't even a practicing Catholic. Okay. And one time she said to me, because she dated this nice guy for a while, and then she broke up with him. And then she had the audacity to sit at my kitchen table at my mom's house, all right, because she was friends with my mom. And she turned around and said, Joey, why can't I meet a nice guy? I got livid. She didn't talk to me for a while. I said, you had one. You had one. What are you talking about? You don't want a nice guy. I said right to her face, Joe, you don't want a nice guy. You had one. You want the badass. You want the guy with the tattoos. You want the guy that's going to slap you in the face once in a while. Can you imagine? Now, I'm bringing that up for a reason. Can you imagine if she actually went out with a guy who said, well, I'd really like to get to know you and we could develop a relationship, but we're not having sex till we get married. She didn't want a nice guy.
That's what I'm talking about.
And
that's why you get the Bushes. That's why we get even Trump. I mean, Trump, listen, he was, if you ask me, I think his core in many ways was focused on the average American. Some people are going to disagree with me. Fine. You know, you're entitled to that. But dude, he's a deeply flawed man, Donald Trump. Deeply flawed man. He's married 3 times. You know, like he's obnoxious as hell, dude. He's obnoxious. We're not interested in the nice guy. You see, this doesn't completely shock me. It kind of does, but it doesn't completely shock me. I mean, this is why America is in trouble. The foundations of America are rotten. And only God can fix it. And he will, though, because he loves us. You see, God, that's the thing about God's love that's amazing, actually. He never gives up on you. And and life has a way, and I've seen this with people because I've known people my whole entire life. I still have friends from when we were kids. Life has a way of sawing off the edges. Things happen, like your view changes. You're not the same when you're 50 as you were when you're 20. Like, God sees all our flaws and he wants to help us. And he's going to. You know, how that unwinds, I don't know.
Right.
But only God can fix that. And what we can do as Americans that want to live as a godly nation is focus on our own personal holiness. I'm telling you right now, now, that doesn't mean we don't speak the truth. I'll continue to do this show. I'll continue to vote pro-life. I'll continue to support traditional marriage. I'll continue to speak about both of them. But my point is, it's through that America changes, in my view. And
Right.
I'll tell you, like I said, this shouldn't shock us because, again, even the Catholics, Joe, we live the same way as the pagans. Our life is the same. It should be diametrically different. Our
Right.
life, our families, the way we conduct ourselves, everything. And it's not. So why are we shocked?
Right.
Like, and do you somehow, all the people who are listening, we have 122 people in the chat room right now watching live. All the people that are watching, do you actually think that some like God, like philosopher king is going to come out of this muck? And you actually think people are going to support him? No way. No way. Once again,
Right.
give me Barabbas. Crucify the good guy. That's what it's all about. Until we get our hearts right, Joe, it's not happening.
No,
And we're going to
I
have to
agree.
go through that dark night. That's it. And we're going to and it's going to affect the good and the bad alike.
Well, listen, we're going through it now. There's no question about that. We're seeing examples of it, and we have now for a while, but now it's really ramping up. Listen, you have a guy who calls himself the president of the United States, gets up there the other day, and he basically says, "We've been patient. Our patience is at an end." I listened to that and I said, "When the f did I wake up in a totalitarian country? Your patience is at an end. My patience is at an end with you dummy." Like, that's really what I want to say. Like your patience is at an end. You know, and it really is like, and I'm listening to that. And again, hearkening back to McCain for a second, you compare Trump to Mussolini and Hitler. Biden just said that he's got authority over your life. That's not America. But you want to know what? That could be part of our punishment, to have that moron, okay, that absent-minded 80-year-old guy who's lost his marbles, all right, to have him actually have control over your life. It's terrible. Joe, we have time for probably one more topic or so, but it's one that I want to talk about because tired of hearing about how so-and-so is a moderate, this one's a moderate. Merrick Garland is another extremist, pro-abortion, extremist leftist. That's what he is. And he's a scumbag liar. Just to put it in plain terms, okay? That's what he is, because he's lying about pro-life people. What am I talking about, Joe Resinello?
Well, basically, they're talking about the Texas law, and Donahue, the president of the Catholic League, calls out Garland because he's basically, this is what Garland had to say. He's when Joe said he's lying, he says, "We will not tolerate violence against those who seek to obtain or provide reproductive health services." Of course, they're polishing up what that is. That's abortion. Physical obstruction or property damage in violation of the FACE Act. This indictment of pro-life activists is without merit. This is what Donahue is saying. Indeed, it's despicable and a smear. And this is interesting. He said, if pro-life Americans are so violent, Garland should be able to rattle off the names of abortionists whom they have killed. In the 21st century, there have been 4 such killings. You see, in 2009 and 3 in 2015. 2 men, both ex-cons, were responsible, and neither was assisted or associated with a pro-life group. They acted alone. This is, again, the straw man argument. It's like with the abortion argument. They always talk about rape and incest. It's less than 1% of all abortion. This is nonsense and it's a lie. But people eat it up, Joe, because it makes them frigging sleep good at night.
Right.
And because they're rationalizing what they know to be wrong. I mean, it's just typical. Again, does it shock me? No.
But here's my problem with it, okay? And again, I've said before, because I've seen them firsthand. I've seen the real violence that's perpetrated by the pro-death forces down on Bleecker Street in New York City in front of Planned Parenthood, okay? Is Merrick Garland, he's gonna try to sell his point and by disparaging the pro-life movement. Let's get it straight. And that's why it's important what Donahue said. Okay. Even Sam Harris, the atheist, admitted this at one point. He goes, you really don't see too many Christians blowing up. I mean, he pointed out at one point, I think it was on the Bill Maher show a while ago. He said, well, you don't really see Christians blowing up abortion clinics unless you want to go back to an abortion clinic bombing from like 1985. Even he was good enough to admit it. What Garland is doing, he's trying to suggest that praying in front of an abortion clinic represents violent extremism. I've seen the violent extremism up close and personal. I've had them pointing their finger in my face and in my wife's face, okay, in front of good priests and nuns and old people, okay? You see their violence, and Merrick Garland is going to disparage the good people that are praying in front of abortion clinics. Let's get it through. Let's get it straight with everybody out there who's listening to our voice. The forefront of the pro-life movement in America has been the Roman Catholic Church and Roman Catholics in particular. Brave, you want to talk about brave men and women, religious, clergy, all of it, saying we're not letting this issue go. We're not letting baby killing go. We're going to keep fighting against it. And the way we fight is doing what we said in the beginning, Joe. What's more sorrowful outside of the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ? What's the most sorrowful event in human history? Abortion.
Oh, it's a killing of God. But think about
I'm saying what's more. What I'm saying, that's the worst thing. But the next worst thing is the killing of the innocents.
But think about Pilate. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent, but he was willing to turn away from that. Isn't that the same thing when you see Catholic churches being firebombed? Violence against pro-lifers, like Donahue said, there's 4 instances in the 21st century, and then there's a bazillion of other interests, spray painting Our Lady, statues of Our Lady. They know that that's not right.
Right.
But why do people choose to look away, as Pilate did, washed his hands of it? Why? It happens consistently because Christ calls you to change. And the answer is no, I'm not changing. I'm not doing it. So I'm willing to turn away.
Right.
I'll pretend I don't see it. I will not serve. You see, it comes down to that. I won't serve. Oh, it sounds good from your mouth, XYZ person, XYZ priest, whatever. Don't expect me to do that. I'm not doing it. So I'll condone that. So many things, so many people, to the degree I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have to ground our life in God, because what God asks us to do is impossible without him. It's impossible without him.
Right.
And that's the truth. You know, everyone knows what's right. You know, like whether you're Catholic or not, I'm not Jewish, but I don't stand for somebody destroying a synagogue. I know that's wrong.
Right.
But would you speak up against, again, violence against, say, a pro-life judge if you're pro-choice?
Right.
No. I know it's wrong. I'll turn the other cheek.
Yeah, but they're
crucify him once again.
Yeah, but you know that they have no problem with that because they're threatening Brett Kavanaugh when he didn't want to hear this Texas case. So he's getting people showing up at his home. Okay, so real quick, I wanna make give our audience at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online, a quick tidbit from Bill Donahue because I think it's important. He said, "quote If Garland were even-handed, he would know that pro-life Americans have been violently attacked and have been subjected to death threats for many years. There have been bomb threats against Catholic churches, fire bombings of Catholic school buses with pro-life signs, calls for violence against pro-lifers on college campuses, and widespread acts of church vandalism. And he says, and lest we forget, while the killing of unborn babies is legal, the fact remains that abortion clinics are a much more deadly place for children than they are for those who do the killing. Think about that, Mr. Garland and Mr. Biden. As usual, Bill Donahue is spot on. Joe, we got 40 seconds. Any final thoughts on the Crusade channel?
I'll be honest with you. I think the key to all this is to know that we're sinners and, frankly, that we're weak and we need God. You see, we're not convinced of it yet as a people. We're not convinced of it because if we were, things would change. We're still convinced that we could fix it. We, as in the proverbial we. No, we can't.
Well, remember something. Let's leave it there. And remember that Our Lady, as we said earlier, Our Lady of Sorrows could not fix Good Friday and what happened. She could do nothing on Holy Saturday. She trusted. That's what we need to do. I, for one, am going to encourage Joe Resinello, who prays the rosary every day, all right, to offer it up to Our Lady of Sorrows. I'm going to do the same thing, all right? I'm going to do a novena to Our Lady of Sorrows. Recommend that all of you do that. And let's take Our Lady, not lip service. We mean it when we say it because we're Catholic men. All right. Take Our Lady as the model of how we're supposed to be acting right now. She witnessed the most unjust act in human history perpetrated on her son, Jesus Christ. Okay. What we're going through is nothing compared to what she went through. Let's take her example. Let's pray. Let's fast. Let's go to confession. Let's do all the things we need to do. And let's be counter-revolutionaries. I think that's a good place to move forward. So at the end of the day, we want to thank you all for joining us. You're listening to us on the Crusade Channel. You're home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing.